China's new tariff strategy, a new peak in the US China trade war. President Donald Trump has announced an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods unless Beijing withdraws its 34% counter tariff, intensifying the ongoing trade tensions. China responded firmly, vowing to fight to the end and preparing a series of countermeasures. Two influential Chinese bloggers revealed the retaliatory steps Beijing is considering, including significantly higher tariffs on U.S. agricultural products like soybeans and sorghum, further hurting American farmers. A ban on U.S. poultry imports due to concerns over avian flu. Suspension of fentanyl cooperation at a time when the U.S. is facing a serious opioid crisis. Restrictions on U.S. firms participating in service-related sectors in China, especially legal consulting. A ban or limitation on U.S. films, which could deal a heavy blow to Hollywood. Investigations into intellectual property benefits gained by U.S. companies in China. These leaked measures have already caused market volatility. While hopes of domestic economic stimulus helped stabilize Asian markets, the Hang Seng Index pared gains after the midday break, signaling investor uncertainty. The ongoing trade conflict reflects long-standing tensions between the two economic superpowers, rooted in issues like intellectual property theft and trade imbalances. Still, history suggests room for negotiation, as seen with the Phase 1 trade deal in 2020. Conclusion. This latest round of tariff threats could have serious consequences for both nations and global supply chains. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether the U.S. and China can return to the negotiating table or continue down a path of escalating economic confrontation.
Gold soars to highest single-day gain since October 2023 amid US-China trade tensions. Gold prices posted their strongest single-day surge since October 2023 on Wednesday, jumping over 115 to reach $3,106.10 per ounce. The rally was driven by intensifying US-China trade tensions and growing instability in the US Treasury market. President Trump imposed a steep 125% tariff on Chinese imports, prompting China to retaliate with 84% levies, sparking fears of a prolonged trade war. Simultaneously, US Treasury yields spiked to 4.38% as hedge funds rapidly unwound leveraged bond positions, fueling concerns of a looming Treasury market crisis. In response, investors rushed to safe haven assets like gold and silver. Spot gold rose 2.6%, US gold futures climbed 3%, and silver gained 3.1%. Additional drivers included rising inflation risks, expectations of a Federal Reserve rate cut in June, and speculation that China may dump US treasuries as a form of retaliation. Analysts say gold's rally mirrors its 2020 breakout, when global economic turmoil spurred a massive flight to hard assets. With a potential new high of $13,201 in sight, gold is reaffirming its role as a trusted safe haven amid financial and geopolitical uncertainty.
U.S.-China trade war escalates. Trump hints at using most powerful weapons. Rare earths emerge as the new battlefield. As tensions between the U.S. and China escalate, President Donald Trump has hinted that the U.S. may resort to the most powerful weapons in the world, suggesting undisclosed strategic leverage. One key focus, rare earth elements, the critical resources powering everything from smartphones to advanced weaponry. China currently controls up to 80% of the global rare earth supply chain, from mining to refining, giving it massive leverage in geopolitical disputes. In 2010, Beijing cut off exports to Japan during a territorial clash, clearly demonstrating how it can weaponize resource control. Meanwhile, the U.S. heavily depends on Chinese rare earths for manufacturing missiles, stealth aircraft, semiconductors, and next-gen military tech. In response, Trump signed an emergency executive order in 2020 to ramp up domestic production and secure alternative sources from allies like Australia, Vietnam, and Greenland. Behind the scenes, the U.S. is reportedly stockpiling critical elements like tungsten and neodymium, vital for energy-based weapons and railguns. However, analysts warn that America lacks the necessary refining infrastructure, leaving it vulnerable if China tightens exports. Beijing's recent restrictions on gallium and germanium, essential for semiconductor production, underscore its readiness to strike back in a full-scale trade war. Rare earths may become the 21st century Suez Canal. Whoever controls the supply controls the balance of global power. The US is racing against time to break free from its dependence. But the question remains, will Trump's strategy be enough to shift the balance, or is Washington on the brink of a technological blackout imposed by Beijing? Gold hits record $3,200 an ounce. Is the US dollar on the brink of collapse due to Trump's policies? Gold has just surged to a record high of $3,200 per ounce, reflecting growing concerns over the serious decline of the US dollar. According to financial analyst Mike Adams, the root of the problem lies in former President Donald Trump's unstable trade policies, especially his sudden tariff reversals, which have thrown global markets into chaos, disrupted supply chains, and driven many countries to turn their backs on the dollar, seeking alternative payment systems like BRICS. Adams warns that hyperinflation is looming. Over the past 3 years, gold prices have risen by more than 50%, a clear signal, he says, of the dollar's weakening. He even predicts you'll soon have to pay $5,000 for a single ounce of gold, and basic necessities, their prices will skyrocket. He likens the current state of the US to a dying empire, isolated globally and internally, pursuing what he calls self-destructive economic policies, from endless money printing to extreme economic nationalism and censorship. So what's the solution? According to Adams, it's simple. Ditch the dollar and start stockpiling gold and silver to protect your wealth before it's too late. He emphasizes, this economic path is unsustainable. Those who don't prepare will pay a heavy price. While there's still debate over the true causes of the crisis, one thing is clear. Confidence in the US dollar is crumbling, gold is soaring, and a financial earthquake may be just around the corner. The European Union has just announced a temporary pause on its planned retaliatory tariffs worth over $23 billion on US goods, ranging from corn and wheat to motorcycles and clothing. The move follows President Donald Trump's decision to temporarily lower import duties on EU steel and aluminum. The 90-day pause is meant to give both sides a chance to return to the negotiating table. Global markets responded swiftly and positively. US stocks surged, European shares rallied, and investor sentiment calmed, at least for now. However, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen issued a clear warning. If negotiations fail, the EU is ready to activate its countermeasures, and all options remain on the table. While tensions with the EU may be easing, the US-China trade conflict is heating up. President Trump has raised tariffs on Chinese imports to a staggering 125%, prompting an immediate vow of retaliation from Beijing. The Chinese yuan has dropped to a record low, reflecting growing concern over the country's economic outlook. Despite this temporary de-escalation, the global trade war is far from over. The next 3 months will be crucial, determining whether the world turns to dialogue or braces for the next wave of confrontation. Trump's new trade offensive, 130 nations at the table, China left out. The Trump administration is shaking up the global trade landscape. Over 130 countries have entered negotiations with the US under the Reciprocal Trade Act, aiming to lower tariffs on a mutual basis. While Japan, South Korea, and the EU are showing goodwill, China has been effectively sidelined, with tariffs on its goods now reaching a staggering 145%. America's strategy is clear: strengthen alliances, tighten the screws on rivals. A 90-day tariff pause has temporarily cooled tensions with most partners, but talks with China? Practically non-existent. The US accuses Beijing of threatening technological sovereignty and dominating global supply chains. White House advisor Kevin Hassett calls it a 2-minute drill to reclaim economic control. Instead of waiting years for multilateral deals, the Trump administration is playing hardball, forcing nations to choose, play fair or pay the price. Domestically, the strategy is not without backlash. American businesses, especially in manufacturing and agriculture, are struggling with the constant shifts and unpredictability. At its core, this is a tale of two worlds: those who cooperate and earn reduced tariffs, and those who resist and face the consequences. It's a historic pivot away from old-school multilateralism toward a blunt transactional model, deal or disconnect. With the 90-day window ticking down, all eyes are on Washington. Will this bold approach restore America's global trade leverage or spark a new wave of economic instability? A new era of global trade is unfolding, and no nation can afford to sit on the sidelines.